Joaquin Consuelos has officially made his Broadway debut, and Kelly Ripa wasn't there to see it. Ripa and Mark Consuelos' youngest son stars in the revival of Death of a Salesman, which performed its first preview on Friday, March 6th. At the top of Live with Kelly and Mark's Monday, March 9th episode, Ripa revealed the surprising reason she was not at the show. "I said to him, I want to come to first preview. And he said, Mom, no. And I was like, why? And he's like, it's previews. Just wait till opening night," Ripa explained. And I was like, I don't want to wait till opening night. I'd like to see a preview and then go to opening night. But I respected his wishes. Given Joaquin's request, Ripa decided to get out of town for the weekend. Mark stayed in New York City, as he is currently in rehearsals for his own Broadway debut in the play Fallen Angels, which also begins previews this month. Unlike Ripa, Mark was not prohibited by Joaquin from seeing Death of a Salesman's first performance. "I was having dinner with him, and we were just talking. And I said, when do you want me to come? And he goes, you can come whenever you want," Mark told live viewers. Though he was uncertain at first, Mark was convinced by his Fallen Angels castmates to watch Joaquin's first show. They're like, you have to go on the first night. "There's only one first time," he stated, to which Ripa retorted, "which is what I was saying." Mark, however, did not tell Joaquin he was going to the show. As a result, Joaquin asked Mark to deliver his dinner to the theater. "I got a ticket, but now I've got this dinner with me," Mark quipped. "I came to the theater with this little cooler pack." On Live, Mark showed off his Death of a Salesman playbill, which he had Joaquin sign. "That's his autograph. We got to work on that," Ripa joked. Mark went on to gush about Joaquin's performance, stating, "If you're in New York, please go see this play. He's amazing. He did such a good job. You know, it's a 3-hour play with an intermission." I did not blink. I was just like watching him. There was a smile on my face. He added, "The people on either side of me were crying. And as he was taking his first curtain call, the lady next to me, she goes, 'Mazel tov. Your son was amazing.'" Ripa noted that Mark and several of their friends sang Joaquin's praises via text. She wrapped up the discussion by sharing that Joaquin gave her approval to see the show this week. Joaquin graduated from the University of Michigan School of Drama in May 2025. He is the youngest of Ripa and Mark's 3 children, including son Michael and daughter Lola. Once, in a city that holds its breath for the sound of footsteps on a wooden stage, a small private kingdom of nerves and pride quietly shifted. At the heart of it was a moment too honest to be scheduled, the first preview of a young actor's life-defining night. In the bright public world where cameras photograph smiles as currency, one household chose, with a hush and a laugh, to let a child keep a small piece of magic to himself. It began in the kitchen, where the day had not yet learned the difference between dread and delight. On the counter, beside an open script, sat a steaming mug that had been forgotten. On the phone, messages blinked like fireflies, friends, a producer, a proud uncle, each one wanting the same thing, to tell the family the obvious big and loud. But the family, for once, did not move as a single organism. Each limb had its own plan. There was the host, who every morning made intimacy into a performance, who had spent her life translating private joy into television gold. She had been the one to ask, with the softness that pleasure sometimes requires, if she could be there for the first public breath of her child on a Broadway stage. She imagined herself in the dark, leaning forward like any mother, wanting to be the first to witness the light that would settle on his face. She imagined applause like confetti, like evidence of a life well begun. There was the actor, husband, partner, fellow truster of curtains, who rehearsed his own debut across town. He moved through lines and stage directions as if they were furniture he had learned to carry without breaking. He believed in first nights the way sailors believe in stars, certain that you could navigate by the point when a story is finally presented to the world. He also held a small, secret appetite for being both a father and a witness. And there was the youngest, whose name had been inked into playbills, and who had practiced crying on cue in dim basements and noisy classrooms. He had learned the theater's ancient grammar at a school where mornings smelled of coffee and chalk and the reverent rustle of other actors' pages. He had learned to listen first, to make the other person's breath a reason for his own. He had earned, in private, the right to say no. When she asked, he refused, not with a flourish, but with something older, a protection that kept himself from being seen in stages before he felt ready. "It's previews," he told her simply. "Just wait till opening night." The words were not a rebuke so much as a small armor. He was asking for privacy inside an arena that sells privacy to the highest bidder. She wanted to argue. She wanted, absurdly, to be twice the mother, both the sentinel and the celebrant. But she had been around long enough to know when pride would not serve a child's needs. So she packed a small bag for a weekend she would spend elsewhere, creating a different kind of distance, a place to breathe without the expectation of being the first to stand and clap. His father stayed. He had a rehearsal across town, a different house of stories, a production that would open in its own time. Yet the father found himself in an ancient and pleasant dilemma. When loyalty to one child's privacy struck a different, softer chord, how could he claim the right to watch while a mother, who had asked, respected the son's wish? The father, who loved both the stage and the quiet dinners they ate together, negotiated with himself the small acts of deception everyone invents for love. On the night of the preview, the city smelled like rain on hot pavement, or like the theater always smells, a mix of old velvet and new ambition. He walked in with a cooler pack wrapped like a secret, a dinner intended for his son, who had asked that food be brought to him. Instead of applause, inside the cooler, sandwiches waited, possibly a warm bowl, perhaps a stubborn Tupperware of something his mother had once made, an edible talisman. He had not told his son he would be there. He wanted the surprise to be a simple pleasure, unannounced as a kiss. The theater itself hummed with that particular electricity reserved for people who know they are about to watch something irreversible. Curtains do not shout. They just promise. The audience arranged itself like a fleet of small lights, expectations threaded through each row. People had bought tickets with the intention of being the very first to witness someone else's transformation. Some would cry, some would gape. All would be witnesses. The young actor found his place on the stage as if he and the boards had a private arrangement. He gave, the boards received. For 3 hours, with an intermission that acted like an exhale, he inhabited another man's life with a generosity that is the only honest currency between performer and audience. He did not perform for the cameras. He performed for the truth of the scene. Faces in the dark bent toward him like people listening for the next line of a favorite song. Behind him, in a place that feels to most people like silence, but to theater folk is a different kind of loud, backstage, murmurs moved like small streams. Old hands and new faces traded glances. A stage manager checked a list as if it were a small scripture. A dresser smoothed a costume with the kind of affection that one might usually reserve for fragile heirlooms. The air smelled, improbably, of hairspray and the soft iron tang of adrenaline. The father, who had taken his seat beside two strangers who would become his accidental companions for the evening, watched with a smile that slowly grew teeth. He watched as the young man on stage turned the language of the script into a living thing, and something new happened. The center of his chest warmed. He forgot the secret dinner in his bag for a moment, then remembered and laughed at himself for having once imagined that all proofs of love should be public. After the curtain call felt like a small harvest. The audience rose in waves, the sound cresting and spilling. The father experienced an unfamiliar ache that had nothing to do with the lines he had rehearsed. It was the ache of being both parent and audience, what it feels like to hear your child described in standing ovations by strangers. A woman beside him whispered, between tears and the smile that only a perfect theatrical moment produces, Mazel Tov. He tried to pass the compliment forward with a humility that was almost its own performance.